Beyond the gray seas, beyond the mortal kingdoms of later ages, there once stood an island kingdom so beautiful. Sailors claimed its harbors looked like pieces of the sunset itself. Númenor, a land of sea cliffs, white towers, golden harbors, and ships that crossed waters no ordinary folk had ever seen. But tonight, we are not kings, we are not captains, we are not mighty lords of the sea. Tonight, we live quietly upon the western coast, keeping watch from a lonely lighthouse where waves crash endlessly against the cliffs below. So, before we climb the tower stairs and light the great lantern above the sea, take a moment to subscribe if you enjoy these slow, peaceful journeys through the forgotten corners of Tolkien's world. And if you'd like, leave a comment telling me which corner of Middle-earth you'd spend a quiet evening in. Now let the world grow softer around you, and let us walk westward toward the shores of Númenor, while evening settles across the sea. The lighthouse stands alone upon the cliffs, tall, white, weathered by salt wind and countless storms rolling inward from the great sea. Far below, dark waves crash endlessly against black volcanic stone. Foam bursts silver beneath the fading light before slipping once more into the restless western waters. The keeper climbs slowly toward the tower entrance, carrying a lantern and a satchel of oil supplies. The path winds dangerously close to the cliff edge. Strong sea winds tug steadily at his dark blue cloak, embroidered with the silver star of Númenor. Above him, gulls circle against the orange evening sky. The smell of salt fills the air. Sharp, clean, endless. Behind the cliffs, the western countryside stretches softly beneath the late sunlight. Rolling green hills, white stone roads, small vineyards and distant farms glowing gold beneath the coming dusk. But the keeper's world belongs mostly to the sea, to storms, to ships crossing dangerous waters beneath uncertain skies. At last, he reaches the great wooden door of the lighthouse. Iron hinges groan softly as he pushes inside. Immediately, the sound changes. Outside, the ocean roars endlessly against the cliffs. Inside, the tower feels calm. Cool stone walls curve upward around a narrow spiral staircase, lit by warm lanterns fixed carefully into alcoves. The air smells faintly of lamp oil, old rope, sea salt, and cedar wood carried upward from the storage rooms below. The keeper begins climbing, step after step, circling steadily upward through the tower. He has walked these stairs thousands of times, during calm evenings, during violent storms, during long fog-filled nights when the sea vanished entirely beyond the lantern glass. The lighthouse has become part of him somehow. Its rhythms, its silences. It's endless watching over the western coast. At last, he reaches the lantern chamber at the summit. The view steals breath even after years. The western sea stretches endlessly beneath the fading sunset. Golden light ripples across the water, all the way toward the horizon, where sky and ocean blend together in soft silver haze. Far below, waves strike the cliffs in long, rhythmic bursts. And farther south, tiny ship lanterns drift slowly toward the harbor roads of Númenor. The keeper sets down his satchel and begins the evening work, cleaning the great lantern glass, checking the polished mirrors behind the flame, refilling oil reservoirs with careful hands practiced by long habit. The work feels peaceful, meaningful in its quietness. Every ship passing these cliffs depends upon this light during dangerous weather. Fishermen, merchants, sailors returning home after months upon open waters. The keeper eventually strikes flint against steel. A small flame flitters to life, then slowly grows brighter within the great lantern housing. Warm golden light spreads outward across the darkening sea. Soon, the great beacon turns steadily above the cliffs of Númenor, a guiding star beside the western ocean. The keeper watches silently while twilight deepens around the tower. Far away, the first evening stars emerge above the water. The sea grows darker now, deep blue fading slowly toward black. Yet the lighthouse beam continues sweeping patiently across the waves, steady, reliable. The keeper settles beside the open lantern window, carrying a small clay cup of warm tea brewed earlier below. The wind moves softly through the chamber, cool ocean air carrying distant rain from somewhere beyond the horizon. He listens quietly. Waves below, the faint creak of the turning lantern mechanism, gulls crying somewhere beyond the cliffs. There is loneliness in lighthouse life, but not unhappy loneliness. A peaceful solitude shaped by sea winds and endless horizons. The keeper eventually notices a ship far below, moving slowly northward beneath the growing dark. Its lantern glows faint amber against the water, tiny compared to the enormous sea surrounding it, yet steady. He wonders briefly where the sailors came from. Perhaps southern ports, perhaps the distant coasts of Middle-earth, perhaps lands even farther beyond ordinary maps. Númenorian ships travel farther than most kingdoms would ever dare. The sea defines them, shapes them. Even here, alone within the lighthouse tower, the keeper feels connected to every road upon the ocean. Night deepens slowly across the western coast. Stars multiply above the sea. The lighthouse lantern continues its endless turning over the waves. And high above the cliffs of Númenor, the keeper begins another long, peaceful night, watching the waters beneath the stars. Night settles fully over the western shores of Númenor. The final traces of sunset disappear beyond the sea, while the great lighthouse beam turns steadily through darkness above the cliffs. Far below, waves crash endlessly against black volcanic stone. White foam flashes briefly in the lantern glow before vanishing once more into the restless water. The keeper remains alone within the lantern chamber. Warm, golden light flickers softly across the curved stone walls, while the great mechanism hums with quiet, steady rhythm beside him. Outside, the sea stretches beyond sight, an endless, moving darkness beneath the stars. The keeper pours another cup of tea from a small iron kettle resting beside the lantern housing. Steam curls gently upward, carrying the scent of mint and sea herbs gathered earlier along the cliffs. Simple comforts matter deeply in lonely places. Warm tea, dry firewood, the familiar sound of waves beneath the tower. He settles beside the narrow western window overlooking the ocean. Cool, salt wind drifts softly through the opening, stirring loose strands of dark hair across his face. Far below, the harbor roads glow faint gold beneath scattered lanterns. Ships drift slowly towards safe anchorage, while distant harbor bells ring softly across the night water. Númenor never truly sleeps. Even during the quietest hours, ships still cross her seas. Sailors still navigate beneath the stars. The island kingdom breathes with the rhythm of tides and wind. The keeper eventually rises to inspect the lantern mechanism once more. Bronze gears turn steadily beside the flame. The polished mirrors behind the light reflect warm gold across the chamber. Every movement of the beacon feels calm, reliable. The lighthouse has guided ships safely through storms for generations. Long before the Keeper was born, long before many of the harbors below were even built, outside, clouds begin gathering slowly across the western horizon, dark shapes drifting over the sea. The Keeper notices them immediately, storm clouds. Still distant, but moving steadily eastward toward the cliffs. He listens carefully. The wind has changed. Softer now, heavier somehow. Old lighthouse keepers learn to read weather the way sailors read maps. The sea always speaks before storms arrive. The Keeper descends briefly through the tower, carrying his lantern. The spiral staircase glows warmly beneath the moving light. Below the lantern chamber lie several small rooms built into the thick stone interior. A narrow sleeping chamber, storage rooms stacked with oil barrels and rope, a tiny kitchen smelling faintly of bread baked earlier that morning. Everything within the lighthouse feels worn but cared for. Simple wooden furniture, polished smooth by years of sea air. Hooks lined with heavy rain cloaks. Shelves filled with maps, weather journals, and old navigation charts, copied carefully by generations of keepers. The Keeper pauses beside one weathered journal resting open upon a desk. Its pages contain notes written decades earlier, storm patterns, ship sightings, records of violent winters when waves crashed nearly halfway up the cliffs. The sea remembers everything, and lighthouse keepers try to remember alongside it. Outside, rain finally begins, soft at first, tiny droplets tapping gently against the lantern glass high above. The Keeper returns upward, carrying another armful of firewood toward the small iron stove beside the lantern chamber. Soon, warmth spreads softly through the tower once more. The smell of cedar smoke mingles pleasantly with salt air and lamp oil. Beyond the windows, the storm slowly gathers strength. Rain sweeps across the ocean in silver waves beneath the turning beacon. The Keeper watches quietly while distant lightning flickers far out at sea. Not dangerous yet, only beautiful. The western waters of Númenor always appear most mysterious during storms. The horizon disappears entirely. The sea and sky blend into one endless moving darkness beneath the lighthouse beam. Hours pass slowly. The storm deepens. Wind presses harder against the tower now, while waves thunder louder below the cliffs. Yet inside the lighthouse, warmth and light remain steady. The Keeper trims the great flame carefully, checks the gears, listens to the storm surrounding the tower. There is comfort in being awake while others sleep safely because of your work. Somewhere beyond the rain, ships continue navigating the dangerous coast. And somewhere upon those dark waters, sailors glance toward the lighthouse beam with relief. The Keeper eventually notices another vessel emerging faintly through the storm. Its lantern sways wildly upon the waves. The ship fights heavy water while slowly approaching the safer northern channels. The Keeper watches silently. The lighthouse beam sweeps across the sea again, patient as a heartbeat. At last, the distant vessel changes course slightly toward safety. The Keeper relaxes quietly beside the lantern. Outside, rain lashes endlessly against the cliffs of Númenor. Lightning flickers silver across the western sea, but high above the storm, the lighthouse continues turning steadily through the darkness, while the Keeper watches peacefully over the restless waters of the island kingdom. Let us remain beside the western sea a little longer, while storm lanterns burn through the night above the cliffs of Númenor. The storm reaches the lighthouse fully sometime after midnight. Rain lashes hard against the tower windows, while fierce winds roar endlessly across the cliffs below. The sea has vanished entirely now. Only darkness and white bursts of foam appear briefly whenever lightning flashes beyond the waves. Yet the great lantern continues turning steadily overhead, warm gold cutting patiently through rain and mist. Inside the tower, the keeper moves calmly through familiar routines. He tightens shutters along the lower chambers, checks the oil reserves, adds fresh wood to the small iron stove, glowing warmly beside the lantern machinery. Storm nights demand attention, but never panic. The old keepers always taught that fear spreads faster than fire inside a lighthouse. So the keeper works slowly, carefully. The tower itself seems built for endurance. Its thick white stone walls barely tremble beneath the weather. Generations of storms have struck these cliffs long before tonight, and still the lighthouse stands. The keeper eventually pauses beside the western window, carrying a steaming bowl of fish stew prepared earlier before the storm arrived. The smell fills the lantern chamber pleasantly. Sea herbs, garlic, fresh bread warming beside the stove. Outside, thunder rolls endlessly over the western ocean. Yet somehow, the storm only makes the lighthouse feel cozier, safer, like a small island of warmth floating above the raging sea. The keeper eats slowly while listening to the tower breathe around him. The soft turning of gears, rain rattling against glass, the deep low roar of waves exploding against the cliffs far below. Lonely work perhaps, but peaceful too. At some point during the night, the storm grows thick enough that even the lighthouse beam struggles against the rain. The keeper narrows his eyes toward a dark sea, visibility fading, dangerous conditions for ships. He adjusts the lantern flame carefully, making the beacon burn brighter against the weather. The polished mirrors behind the light glow almost white gold now, far beyond the tower, hidden somewhere inside the storm. Sailors continue searching for this beam. The keeper knows this. That knowledge keeps him awake through long nights like these. Another flash of lightning bursts across the horizon. For a brief moment, the entire western sea becomes visible. Towering waves, rain sweeping sideways through the darkness. And far away, another ship, tiny, fragile against the enormous storm. The keeper immediately moves toward the signal bell, hanging beside the lantern chamber. 3 slow strikes ring outward through the rain. Deep bronze notes rolling across the cliffs. The old storm warning. The ship lantern shifts faintly in the distance, still moving, still searching through the weather. The keeper remains beside the window long afterward, watching the beam sweep patiently across the Black Sea. Again, again, again. There is something strangely comforting about lighthouse work during storms. No uncertainty, no complicated choices, only the simple task of keeping the light alive until morning. Hours drift onward. The storm never fully weakens. Yet, little by little, the keeper settles deeper into the quiet rhythm of the night. Tea warming beside the stove, lantern gears humming softly. The endless sweep of light through rain and darkness. At some point, he opens one of the old weather journals resting beside the lantern controls. The pages crackle softly beneath his fingers. Records from earlier keepers fill the worn parchment. Storm tides, shipwrecks avoided, fog thick enough to swallow entire coastlines. One faded line catches his attention. The sea grows loudest when men forget how small they truly are. The keeper smiles faintly. Old lighthouse wisdom. Simple, but true. Outside, the storm continues roaring against Númenor's western cliffs. Yet, inside the tower, warmth remains steady. The great lantern burns bright above the sea. And somewhere, upon the black waters beyond sight, sailors still follow its patient light towards safe harbors beneath the island kingdom. The keeper eventually settles into his chair beside the lantern once more. His cloak dries slowly near the stove. The storm bell sways gently overhead with each powerful gust. Beyond the windows, lightning flashes silver across endless water. And through the long dark hours before dawn, the lighthouse of Númenor continues watching faithfully over the western sea, while rain and waves sing endlessly beneath the tower. Let us drift onward through the final hours of storm and starlight, where the lighthouse still burns above the western cliffs, while Númenor sleeps beside the sea. The storm begins weakening sometime before dawn. Rain softens gradually against the tower windows. Thunder fades farther west across the open sea. Only the waves remain loud now. Long, dark swells crashing endlessly against the cliffs below the lighthouse. The keeper notices the change immediately. The sea speaks differently when storms begin to tire. The wind loses its sharpness. The rain falls straighter. And somewhere beneath the darkness, calm slowly returns to the water. Inside the lantern chamber, warmth still lingers around the small iron stove. The flame glows softly beside hanging rain cloaks and shelves lined with weather journals. The keeper pours the last of the tea into a clay cup while the lighthouse beam continues its endless turning across the sea. Outside, clouds drift more slowly now. Occasionally stars appear between them. Gold silver lights reflected faintly across the restless water. The keeper opens the western window slightly. Cool sea air rushes immediately into the chamber, carrying salt spray and the deep scent of rain-washed stone. Far below, foam gleams pale against the cliffs. The ocean still feels enormous, wild, ancient, but no longer angry. The keeper leans quietly against the stone wall beside the lantern. These final hours before sunrise are often his favorite. The sea grows calmer, the world quieter, and for a little while, the lighthouse feels suspended between storm and morning. He notices the distant ship from earlier once more, now much closer to the safer northern channels. Its lantern burns steadily through the thinning rain. The keeper watches with quiet satisfaction. Another ship guided safely home. The work rarely earns songs. No great celebrations greet lighthouse keepers, but perhaps that is part of the peace in it. The sea does not care about glory, only steady lights during dark weather. The keeper eventually descends partway through the tower toward the lower chambers. The spiral staircase glows warmly beneath hanging lanterns. Each step echoes softly against the curved stone walls. Below, the sleeping quarters remain calm and simple. A narrow bed, shelves of books copied by sailors and scholars from Númenor's western ports, small carved ship models resting beside navigation charts, and near the eastern window, a weathered wooden chair perfectly placed for watching sunrise over the sea. The keeper settles there briefly, while listening to the fading storm outside. Somewhere in the darkness beyond the cliffs, gulls begin crying once more. The first sign that dawn approaches. The world always sounds different near sunrise, especially beside the ocean. The keeper closes his eyes for a moment. The lighthouse hums softly above him. The waves continue their endless rhythm below, and for a little while, everything feels perfectly balanced between silence and motion. At last, pale gray light begins appearing far beyond the eastern hills of Númenor. Morning. The storm clouds slowly break apart over the western sea. Long streaks of silver blue spread across the horizon. The keeper climbs once more toward the lantern chamber. The lighthouse beam still turns steadily through the fading darkness. Soon it will rest until evening returns, but for now it continues its patient watch over the sea. The keeper reaches the summit just as the first sunlight touches the western clouds. The sight is beautiful after the long storm. Golden light spills across the ocean. Waves shimmer bronze and silver beneath the morning sky. Far away, the distant ship continues safely northward through calmer waters. And below the cliffs, white foam drifts peacefully through the tide pools carved into the black volcanic stone. The keeper opens the great lantern shutters fully. Morning air floods the chamber, fresh, cold, filled with the scent of salt and rain. He extinguishes the great flame carefully. The warm glow fades at last, after guarding the coast through the stormy night. Now only sunlight remains, bright upon the sea. The keeper stands quietly beside the silent lantern. Númenor stretches beautifully behind the cliffs. Green western hills glowing beneath fresh rain. White roads winding toward distant harbors. Golden towers shining softly beneath the early morning sky. For a long while, he simply watches the ocean. The endless western sea, rolling calmly beneath the light of dawn. And somewhere beyond those distant waters lie lands no ordinary sailors will ever see. Yet here, upon the cliffs of Númenor, beside the weathered lighthouse tower, the keeper feels no need to travel farther. The sea already brings the whole world to him. Storms, ships, stars reflected upon dark water, and through every long, peaceful night, the quiet purpose of keeping the lantern burning beside the endless waves. Morning settles softly across the western shores of Númenor. The storm has passed completely now. Only long, rolling waves remain beneath the cliffs, while sunlight spreads golden across the endless sea. The lighthouse stands bright against the clear morning sky. White stone still damp with rain. Seabirds circle lazily above the tower, while gull cries drift through the cool ocean air. The keeper descends slowly through the spiral staircase, carrying the extinguished lantern, tools back toward the lower chambers. The tower feels quieter after storm nights, almost sleepy. The great beacon rests now until evening returns. Yet the lighthouse itself never truly sleeps. Waves continue crashing below. Wind still moves through the cliffs, and somewhere beyond the horizon, ships continue crossing the western sea beneath the wide sky of Númenor. Inside the lower chamber, the keeper opens the eastern shutters fully. Warm sunlight spills across the stone floor. The room smells pleasantly of cedar smoke, sea salt, and fresh rain drifting inward from the cliffs. He places the weather journal carefully back upon its shelf. Another storm recorded. Another safe night upon the coast. Then he begins the quiet morning routines, cleaning the lantern glass, refolding damp cloaks beside the stove, preparing fresh bread and sea herb soup within the tiny kitchen built against the tower wall. The peacefulness of lighthouse life lives inside these small rituals. Not grand adventures, not mighty battles, only calm repetition beside the sea. Outside, Númenor shines beautifully after the storm. The western countryside glows green and gold beneath the sunlight. White roads curve through vineyards and rolling hills. Farther south, harbor towers gleam beside the water, where ships already move quietly through the morning tide. The keeper carries breakfast outside, toward a small stone terrace overlooking the cliffs. From there, the view stretches endlessly westward. The great sea glimmers beneath the rising sun, silver near the horizon, deep blue closer to shore, where waves crash against the black stone below. He settles calmly upon the weathered bench beside the tower. Warm bread, hot soup, the endless sound of water. A peaceful beginning after a long storm. Far away upon the sea, the ship from earlier appears once more. Tiny now against the enormous ocean. Its white sails catch the morning light while it continues safely northward along the coast. The keeper watches silently. He will never know the names of those sailors. Yet for a few dangerous hours during the storm, their lives depended upon the lantern above these cliffs. There is quiet comfort in that. Purpose without recognition. Steady work beneath changing skies. The sea teaches people humility. Storms do not care for titles. Waves treat kings and fishermen equally. And perhaps that is why the keeper loves the lighthouse. Here, beside the ocean, life becomes wonderfully simple. Light the lantern, watch the weather. Keep the flame alive until morning. The keeper finishes breakfast slowly, while gulls drift above the cliffs, riding the sea wind. Below, tide pools shimmer between black volcanic rocks, left wet and gleaming by the storm. The lighthouse tower casts a long white shadow across the grasslands behind it. For a while, the keeper simply sits listening. The waves, the wind, the distant cries of harbor workers far below the coast. Númenor feels especially peaceful after storms. The whole island seems washed clean by rain and sea wind. Bright towers gleaming beneath the sun, white ships moving through calm blue waters, fields sparkling with fresh morning dew. It is easy to understand why sailors love this island so deeply. At last, the keeper rises and walks slowly toward the cliff edge. Far below, waves roll endlessly toward the shore. The western sea stretches farther than sight itself. Beyond those waters lie mysteries older than kingdoms. Yet here upon the cliffs, everything feels calm, grounded. The lighthouse behind him, the ocean before him, the steady rhythm of another peaceful day beginning beside the sea. The keeper closes his eyes briefly while the wind moves through his dark hair. Sunlight warms the stone beneath his boots, and somewhere deep below the cliffs, the tide continues its endless song against the coast of Númenor. Perhaps that is what lighthouse keepers truly guard, not only ships, but peace itself. A single warm light turning patiently through storms and darkness beside the sea. The morning grows brighter across the western shores. The lighthouse stands silent until evening comes once more, and far beyond the cliffs of Númenor, the endless ocean continues rolling beneath the sunlight. while gulls circle lazily above the tower, and another calm day begins beside the western sea.